Okay, so in the previous classes, we've learned about strings. We've learned using loop with strings, specifically for loop, right? And this is the agenda for today's class. We learn how to slice a string. If you remember, I told you string is a collection. It's a collection of characters. Okay, and you can just to understand it better, you can visualize that to be like a rack, an almirah with multiple racks, and you store one character in each rack. So if there is a string which had 10 characters, you can visualize it as an almirah having 10 racks, and each rack being numbered starting from 0.
0 to 9.
Right. And each rack stores only a single character. So it's a rack. I call it in programming terms, I call it an array. Okay, so it's an array of characters, and it is indexed, meaning I can read a specific character instead of reading the complete string. If my variable is called name, okay, and if this is the value this variable is pointing to, then whenever in my program, if I refer to this variable, then I get the value this variable is pointing to, the complete value, Shahid in this case. But
Okay.
in, yeah, go ahead, please. But here, if I specify the index number, if I specify index number 1 here, what would I get?
H.
Yes, right. Because this is how it is stored here. Okay, so I can read a specific index. By specifying the index number, I use square brackets and I specify the index number here. Now, there is a way to actually look at a slice of string also. So by slice, I mean, just let's say if this is the way the string is stored, I can just read this portion, not just a single character, but a sequence of characters anywhere in the string. Maybe the first three characters or the last three characters or the middle two characters, anywhere, a sequence of characters anywhere in the string. So for that, what I do is, instead of just specifying a single index number here, I can specify a start index, an end index, and a step. Okay, let's look at it through a program. So what I would do is, okay, you know what, let's look at it through a program. It will be easier to understand. Let me share the Jupyter notebook. So if you have a string, let's say we already have something here. Let's say we have this string. Okay. Now, okay, I've written this loop, but I could just use another variable. I call it variable 1. And this variable 1 will, if, okay, what will happen if I just write these, just look at these two lines of code, ignore this loop part. Right now, this variable is pointing to a value which is bedrock for AI. When I declare a new variable, I am saying that this variable is also pointing to the value that this was pointing to. Okay, so instead of the complete value, now I've assigned bedrock. If I print variable 1, I will get bedrock for AI as the printout. Okay, because variable 1 is also pointing to the same value. But instead of the complete string, I can assign it a portion of the string. So as we discussed, can you also keep writing the code? Let's write it in a new cell. Okay. Okay, looks like a issue with the double quotes. Okay. Okay, who can explain what this code has done?
Ma'am, it will print a bedrock for AI.
No, I've specified index instead of a single index number, I've specified two index numbers here. Okay, so this is
Ma'am,
a
first is the starting number and the second is the ending number. So it will print till the index, the character which has index 5.
right. So this is the syntax to slice. Okay, if I just specify a single index number, it reads that character at that particular index. Instead, if I want to read a sequence of characters, not just a single character, so I can specify the start index, end index, and the step. If I don't specify step, by default, the step is 1, meaning it will read the index number 0, which is this, then plus 1, index number 1, index number 2, index number 3, and 4. It will always go. So if you remember with for loops, when all this, the stop count, okay, stop is a better word here, it'll always goes 1 less than the stop count. Okay, so it'll, if you specify 5 here, it goes till 4, and by default the step is 1. I can change this to 2. Let's see what happens if I change this to 2. So if I don't specify a step, it just takes it as 1. What would happen if I take it as 2?
Mom, it will print B and R.
Yeah. Well, okay. Why 3 characters? Where did you miss? So it'll print the, okay, that's such a long name for a variable, but it prints the index 0. And then because step is provided as 2, it should now go to not plus 1, but plus 2. Okay. Now the next index is decided by doing plus 2 to this starting index. So this should be index 2. What is at index 2?
D.
D, right. And then again plus 2. So at 4, what is at 4?
Oh,
O.
Oh, right. And next should be plus 2, but then we specified a stop at 5, so it cannot go to this index. So it will only print these 3. Okay. Did you understand the meaning of step here? So
Yes, ma'am.
okay, great. So your step size could also be in the negative direction. You can also provide a step -1. So if you remember the assignment, we did the assignment to use for loop to reverse a string. Now we can use string slicing to reverse the string without using a loop. So what we'll do is, okay, I'll give you a minute, just think about it. What would you do if you just wanted, if you wanted the variable 1 to contain this string, but in the reverse order? Give it a minute, think about it. Just remember one thing, that if you don't, I mean, all these are optional. Okay, if you don't specify any index at all, you're getting the complete string. Okay, but if you are specifying this, if you put the brackets here, then that means you want to read either one single specific character or a sequence of characters, and you have 3 parameters to specify here. You can specify a start, you can specify a stop, and you can specify a step. If you don't specify a step, the default value is 1. If you don't specify a stop, the default value is the, the last one. So it automatically does it. So it will go till the end of the string. If you don't specify a start, by default the start is 0. So if you just don't specify anything here, try doing this. If you don't specify any characters, what happens? Try doing this. So in this case, you're not specifying start, you're not specifying stop, you're not specifying step. Or if you specify the step as -1, what would happen? Try it. Okay, I am going to, let's, instead of using new variables, let's just print these values. Let's, what do you expect to happen if I don't specify anything here? See here, so the default values have been taken. The start has been taken as 0, the stop has been taken as the end of the string, the last character of the string. Okay, and in here, if I, since step is optional, so Python just understands that, okay, you want it to take the default value of start and stop, and you've not specified step, so anyway step is taken as default. That's one. What would happen if I put -1 here?
Ma'am, it is
It
printing
will
the
print
reversed order.
Yes,
IA for K C.
Right, it will just print in the reverse order because the start is taken as default value 0, the stop is taken as default value length of the string, the last up to the last character of the string, and step, the default value of step is 1, but you have specified -1 here, which means go in the reverse order. Yeah, so this will just reverse the entire string. And you wrote a complete program to do this. See, there is such a straightforward way to achieve this using string slicing. Okay. And by using slicing, you can also iterate through portions of the string. Suppose you didn't want to, for whatever reason, you have some requirement to fulfill. So for that, you don't want to iterate through the complete string. You just wanted to read a specific substring, a portion, a part of the string, and read each character of that substring. Okay, substring is portion of a string. So it's like, for example, here, if I have the string as GROT, then if I just take one part of it, that will be called the substring of the entire string. Okay, it's a part of it. Let's write a simple loop to iterate through a slice of a string. Okay, using for loop first, and then we'll move on to learning the next loop, which is while loop. Who can explain what happened here?
Ma'am, it took all the default values.
Yes, so the start is taken as 0, the stop is the length of the string, and step is 1. Okay, so all default values are taken. Okay, good. So now you can use the same concept to loop through a slice. Okay, so you used for loop for index in range length of the string, right? That was, okay, that's bad handwriting. Let me just rewrite it. So you used for loop in two ways. One is you use the range function for index in range, the length of the variable, right? This is one way you wrote your loop.
Ma'am,
So,
we will take length -1.
yes, ma'am.
Ma'am,
no,
because length will have the last plus
okay,
1 that.
okay, you are right. But the point is this will automatically, so, if you remember the range function, in here we are using only the stop parameter of range. So whatever stop parameter you provide here, it will go just one less than that value. So if this length is 5, it will anyway go up to 4 only, because the counting starts from 0. So this index will have value 0, 1, 2, and so on, and it will go on to 1 less than this. So that is already taken care of. This range function also has 3 variations, if you remember. One is with you can just provide stop, or you can provide start and stop, or you can provide start, stop, and step. Okay, so this range it'll just give you a counting. If you just provide stop, it starts from 0 by default, and if the stop was 5, the counting will go from 0 to 4. You can provide start and stop. So in case you don't want it to start from 0, you want it to start from 2 or 3 or from some value, then you can provide a start here. For example, if you provide 2 here and you provide 5 here, then the counting will start from 2 and it will go on up to 4. One less, always one less than this. And by default, each count is plus 1 of the previous count. So step is 1 by default, unless you specify different value. If I provide a step count 2 here, a start 2 and a stop 10, then this will start with 2 and then the next count will be 4, then 6, then 8, and that's it. It will just stop there because it cannot take 10. It has to go only up to 1 less than this. Okay. So this will result in index having values 2, 4, 6, 8. That's it. If this was 11, then it will go up to 10. Okay, so this was one way to loop through strings. The other way was for character. This is just a variable name. You don't need to specify this exact name. I use character here because this is just to make it more readable, because this variable is going to hold the value of a character. For character in whatever the string variable was, right? This is the other way. So these are two ways you can use for loop to iterate through strings. Now we'll do a variation of this methodology. So in this line, we are just specifying the variable name here. So this will loop through as many times, the number of iterations will be equal to the length of this variable. But now I'm saying that instead of iterating through the complete string, if I just want to iterate through a portion of the string, suppose I just want to read character by character of this part of the string, ROCK, then R is at index number 0, 1, 2, 3. This is index number 3 and this is index number 6, right? So I don't want to iterate through the complete variable, but I want it to iterate from index number 3 to index number 6. Because I want index number 6 to be included, I'll write 7 here, right? And I don't specify the step count because I am fine with the default value. So now this variable char character will hold the value of the index number 3 in the first iteration, and then index number 4 in the second iteration, then 5, then 6 in the last iteration. So try this code. Let's write it here. So I'll write a loop, okay, for so this is just a variable name. You can put any name here, okay? For character in this variable, and I don't want to iterate through the complete thing. I just want to go from index number 3 to 7. And what I will do is just print the character. So number of iterations that this loop will go through is 3, 4, 5, 6, 4 iterations. Okay. And in each iteration, this character will hold on to the character at that specific index. Got it? So you can loop through a slice of the string instead of the complete string, or you can just read the slice of a string and assign it to a new variable. Depends on what your requirement is. Okay, now moving on to while loop.
Ma'am, if you want to print the vowels and the consonants in the variable, in the build string, as string is stored, so ma'am, then how can we loop in through
Okay, so
this
then you
loop
want
or
to,
all these things?
okay, in that case, you wouldn't want to specify the index number here. What you would want to do is you would want to read each character and identify if the character is a vowel, right? So you can just say, maybe you just wanted to print A or something. So if the character is this or E or F, or whatever. You can just check whether the character is one of these characters. If yes, then print it, else don't print it. So you can write a conditional logic within the for loop. So in each iteration, each character will be checked for these conditions, and only if it satisfies the condition, it will be printed. Okay, let's write a simple logic here. Okay, I'm just specifying 2 characters here. So let's say I'll just print the character only if it is either A or O, okay, not otherwise. Got it? You can write an else also here. So all the conditional logic can be combined with loops. Okay, so now I'm looping through the complete string, but I'm printing only if it's either A or O. I can enhance this condition. I can put whatever condition I want to here. Okay, did I answer your question?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, fine. So for loops are used when you know the number of iterations, right? You want to iterate a specific number of times. Either you use a range function or you let Python do the job for you. You just say that iterate through the string. So the Python automatically determines the length of the string or the length of the slice of the string, and then it iterates as many times. But in any case, whether you use range function or you use this shortcut way that Python provides, you know the number of iterations. The other way to loop through a collection is, or in general loop, is by when you decide the number of iterations depending on a condition. So you want to keep doing the same thing until a condition is met. Okay, like if you're filling a bucket of water, you don't know how many mugs of water you need to put into the bucket to fill it. So you just keep putting 1 mug of water each time in the bucket until the bucket is full. So your condition is you're iterating based on a condition until that condition hasn't been met, or until the condition is true. You keep doing it. So that is when we use while loop. So what we do here is, this is a keyword, Python keyword. You write while and you specify the condition here. Okay, that condition should result in a Boolean. So while index is less than 5, do this. And in each time you increment the index. And you have some logic here. So let's say, and we start with index is equal to 0. Let's say we are just doing something as simple as just printing the index. So what we are doing here is, we started with index is equal to 0. And then this is a keyword. We checked, is index less than 5? Yes, it's less than 5. So condition is met, it's true. So whatever lines of code that you have with this indentation, remember indentation is important in Python. So whatever starts with this indentation is considered part of the while loop. The moment you write a line starting from here, this is outside while loop. So if the condition is true, then all these lines of code are executed. The last line incremented the index. So after all these lines are executed, then again, the execution reaches this check. Index, it's again checked. So now index has value 1 because you incremented here. Then again, this condition is checked. It is index less than 5? Yes. Because index is 1, it's still less than 5. So all these lines of codes are executed again. Then we reach here again, is 2 less than 5 because index is 2 now? Yes. So again, it's executed. Then, so at that point when the value of index becomes 5, and then you reach here. So index has a value 5. Is 5 less than 5? No. So this condition evaluates to false. And at that point, these lines will not be executed. The execution goes to the line just after the loop. Okay. So you can loop based on a condition. Either you know the number of iterations or you are looping based on a condition. So, maybe we can just write a simple loop here. Just declare some variable, initialize it to 0, while. Okay, so all these keywords appear in a different color, whatever editor you use. So if it's not showing in a different color, that means you've done some mistake. Like, I remove this E, it becomes black, right? Because WHIL is not a Python keyword. Okay, while I is less than 2, let's say, something as simple as just print I. If this is all my loop, how many iterations will this loop go through? If this is the code.
Ma'am, 1.
Okay, just check it again. I is equal to 0. So it will check. Is 0 less
Ma'am,
than
2.
From 0 and 1.
okay, I want you to think more. Just actually go through the execution. So is 0 less than 2? No. Then print 0. Then what is the value of I now when it checks next?
1.
Ma'am, 0.
It's 0, right? I'm not incrementing it.
Yes, ma'am.
So this will, how many iterations will this go through now?
1.
Why 1?
Infinity.
Infinite. Correct. The kernel is going to hang. Let's try it. See, you see this symbol here? Kernel is busy. It'll go on and on and on. It never gets to stop unless I kill it. Okay, so this is infinite loop. When you're writing loops, you should always be careful about creating infinite loops. Okay, I've interrupted the kernel, stopped it because it will otherwise never stop. And I'll clear this output because you can see what this output is. And this will go on the entire day. If I leave it for a month, it will go on, it will go on up to a point until it just crashes. Okay, so I'm just going to restart the kernel, clear the output because I've created an infinite loop. So be very careful about creating infinite loops because this condition always evaluates to true. So I have to increment I. Either I can write I is equal to I plus 1, or a shortcut way of writing the same thing is this. This is equivalent to writing I is equal to I plus 1. Now how many iterations it will go through?
Ma'am, 2.
Ma'am, 2.
Right? Okay, somebody is asking on chat why it will go through infinite iterations if I don't specify this. Who can explain? If I remove this line, why does it go to infinite loop?
Ma'am, because the condition never becomes false.
Yes, right. Because I is always 0. I never change the value of I. And in my condition here, I am always checking is I less than 2. So if I is always 0, then 0 less than 2 will always evaluate to true. It never becomes false. So this will just go on. Okay. So, and how do we use while loop to iterate through a string? See, I mean, using for loop is easier for iterating through a string, but it's also possible to iterate through a string using while loop. So how would you write it in a conditional way to iterate through a string using a loop, using while loop, sorry. So I can just declare an index variable as 0, okay? And I can say that while index is less than the length of the string, okay, I'm just using the same variable here. While index is less than this, then just print the character at this index. And this loop again will become infinite if I don't increment index, right? Because I've initialized index as 0. And if I don't increment it, if the length of the string is greater than 0, then this will just go on endlessly. So I have to increment index. index is equal to index plus 1, and the shortcut way is just this. Okay, so what will be the output of this program?
Ma'am, SNT.
Sorry, could you repeat? This is the string, this one here. What would be the output of this program?
Ma'am, B and E.
Why only 2 characters? I'm
Ma'am,
going up to,
BEDROC.
it'll print the complete string, right? Because I see my end is, this is the, I'm using the length of the string here. So index starts at 0. In the first iteration, it takes value 0, and then I'm incrementing it by 1. This line is equivalent to writing index is equal to index plus 1. So then I'm incrementing index by 1. So in the next iteration, index has value 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and then so on. Whatever is the length. If the length is 10, it goes on up to 9. So what will be the output? The complete string, right? I mean, if I write 2 here, then it will just print the index 0 and index 1. Okay. Just the 2
Okay.
characters. But I'm not writing 2 here. I'm saying go on up to the length. So, and what is the length of the string here?
Ma'am, 10.
10. Okay. So index will take on value up to 9, right? Index is equal to 9. When index is equal to 9, it still satisfies this condition and these lines will be executed. But when index is equal to 10, that is the point when loop stops. And anyway, index 10 is an out of range index. Got it? So you can loop through a string using while loop this way. Did everyone understand this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Okay, I wanted to complete a few topics. Yes. Okay, so we have discussed we've discussed this we had already discussed, and we discussed this. Now let's learn about this part. Let's say we have written a loop, whether it's based on a condition or the number of iterations, but if a certain situation occurs, we just want to move out of the loop. We don't want to complete the remaining iterations. Suppose we wanted to we are looping through a string, and we just wanted to identify if there is a Z in the string. Okay, you don't really need a loop for that. Actually, you could just find Z and just do it that way. But suppose we're doing it using a loop. So our objective was to just know whether the character Z is part of the string or not. Okay, so if you're reading each character by character, so the moment you encounter Z, you have found the answer to your question, right? So Z is there in the string. So you don't want to read the other characters at all. So you want to just come out of the loop. There's no point completing the remaining iterations. You want to break out of the loop. That's the break condition. Okay. So for this specific example doesn't really need a loop. You can use a find method to check if the character is there in the string or not. But just an example. Okay. So you understand what breaking the loop means? I'll tell you how you program it, what is the syntax for it, but just understand it conceptually first. So breaking the loop is like you want to come out of the loop based on whatever condition. Okay, it's always based on some condition. Something happened, or what you were looking for was found. Then you just want to move out of the loop. You don't want to complete the remaining iterations. That's breaking out of the loop. Then there is skipping an iteration. Suppose you have in each iteration, suppose and inside the loop, while or for loop, you had 10 lines of code. Okay. But in each iteration, suppose you have a check here. So let's say you're iterating again through a string. You're reading each character one at a time. And if that character happens to be a vowel, you don't want to do anything with it. But if it is a consonant, if it's not a vowel, then you have some further processing to be done. So at the beginning of the iteration, you just check if that character is one of the vowels. Then you want to skip all these lines of code. You don't want these lines of code to be executed. So you just skip the iteration. You just mention a keyword here telling Python to skip these lines of code and move on to the next iteration. Okay. Let's look at it how you do it in the code, and it'll be easier to understand too. Okay, let's say again, let's take this example only. So you are iterating through this string. Okay, and let's say I want to break out of the loop the moment I encounter the letter R. Fine. Okay, so what I do is, let's remove extra lines of code here. So what I want to do is, so by default, what does this code do? This code is printing all the characters in the string. But what I want it to do is, I don't want it to, I want it to stop the moment it encounters an R. So what I'll do is, I'll just, at each iteration, I will just check if the character is R. And if it is R, I just want it to come outside the loop, just break the loop. Don't, forget about executing these lines and forget about the loop altogether. Don't go into further iterations. You don't even check this condition again. Let's see what it does. Okay, I forgot this, and there is an indentation error also because this break was supposed to be inside if. Okay. See what happened here is, I am looping through the entire string character by character, and inside the loop, in each iteration, I'm checking for this condition. So if this condition evaluates to false, anyway, this line is not executed, right? So Python doesn't know if I wanted to break. This line is never executed if this condition evaluated to false. But the moment this condition evaluates to true, this line is executed. So look at the indentation here. So this break statement is inside the if. Okay, that's why this indentation below if. So what this break means is just come outside the loop. So no further iterations will be done. This condition is not going to be checked again. If I had a line here, this line would be executed immediately after breaking from the loop. Okay, if I didn't have this if condition, then this line is executed after all the iterations are done. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. It breaks the loop after it or from itself.
Right. So it's usually based on some condition. If certain condition happened, maybe you wanted to achieve a certain objective, right? Once that objective is met, you no longer care about the remaining iterations. So you just move outside the loop. The other important thing is just skipping an iteration. So I'm just going to copy this code and write a new version here. I'll share this code file with you. Okay. So that's why I'm not deleting this file, this code. So you can look at it later too when you practice. So instead of breaking, I can also say that continue. Don't break outside the loop, complete the remaining iterations. But for this iteration, when the character is R, skip the remaining lines of code in this iteration, right? So in this particular iteration, you have these lines of code to be done. So now I'm telling Python that if this condition is met, just continue, meaning just skip these remaining lines of code and go to the next iteration. So now what will happen is B will be printed, E will be printed, D will be printed. When it's the turn of character R, in that iteration, this condition will evaluate to true. And then this statement continue. This is again a keyword. You can see it's in green color here. Continue will be executed and Python will skip these lines. So R will not be printed. And it goes on to the next iteration. So it's not breaking out of the loop altogether. It is just skipping that particular iteration. So
Ma'am, keyword for skipping is continue.
yes, continue. So break and continue are keywords. Okay. And that's why it
Ma'am,
shows in different color.
I want to ask one thing.
Yeah, sure.
Ma'am, it breaks after the condition and or from the condition.
You're asking about break or continue?
Ma'am, break.
Okay. So, this is a statement. This is like, a line of code. So this line of code will be executed only if this condition evaluated to true, right? Because break is written under the if condition. If this evaluated to false, this line is never executed. If I
Ma'am, that means if R is not present in the string, so it will not execute.
Yes, right. So, if R was not there, then the execution never reaches this line because this condition would never evaluate to true. Let's see what happens if R was not there. Everything is printed, right? There was no R. Only if R happens to come at the beginning, then nothing happens because, in the very first iteration, R is encountered and then this break is executed and you're outside the loop. Okay, so these are all good questions, Mehak. So as keep asking questions. That's a good thing. I appreciate that. And also try all these things, all these questions that you're getting, just try it in code. Even if that leads to a error, a syntax error or an execution error, whatever, when you try it, you learn, right? So all these doubts that you're getting, what will happen if I do this? What will happen if this is the condition? Just try it out in the code. That's how
Okay,
you
ma'am.
learn. Okay, so and then in continue, okay, so what would happen here when I write continue instead of break is only this particular iteration is skipped. And what is skipped? So all the lines of code, if I had a line of code here, this line is anyway executed, even for R, right? Because this continue keyword is here after the if statement. So if I have a print here, this will be executed anyway. Even for R also. Let's print the character here so that we know that we are in that iteration where the character is R. Oops, okay. Let's shorten this string actually. Okay, this will be better. Okay, my kernel is stuck. I need to restart the kernel. Okay, fine. Okay, so what happened here is, so index is initialized to 0. This condition is checked. Is 0 less than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Yes, it's less. 0 is less than 5. So I am inside the loop and the first character is D, it's printed. Then this condition is checked. Is it equal to R? No, D is not equal to R. So it never goes to this line. Then Okay, print this. Print the character at index, whatever index 0. So D is printed. And then in the next one, in the next loop, again, this line is, then we are at character R. Okay, so I'm inside the loop. This character R is printed because that is at index 1. Now I'm checking, is the index okay, index has value 1 now, right? Is the character at index 1 R? Then continue. So what is going wrong with this code? There is a flaw in this code. Let me see who can check. It is going into an infinite loop. That is why the kernel is getting stuck. Let me see if you can find the error. There's no error, but the code is definitely faulty because it's going into an infinite loop. So
Ma'am, after the keyword continue, it just it doesn't interpret the other three statement. And ma'am, the index is not changing here, so that's why it just goes to infinite.
Exactly, yes. So I should, before saying continue, I should increment it anyway, right? Otherwise, the index never gets incremented and this loop endlessly continues for index is equal to 1 and index is equal to 1 is the character R. Okay, first I'll need to restart kernel because kernel is stuck because of the infinite loop. Okay. Okay. So now do you see how it's working? So at index 0, it works fine. I'm inside the loop. This is at the character D being printed. And then for the index is equal to 1, this line is printed because we haven't called continue yet. So this line is printed. Then it checks whether it's character R. Yes, it's character R. So index is incremented and then continue is invoked. So, R is never printed from this line. This line is not executed. And then it moves on to the next 3 characters. And it works fine as expected for the next 3 characters. Got it? So whenever okay, good. So whenever you're using loops, syntax part is easy. You have to be very careful about, you actually need to understand what each line of code is doing so that you don't end up in all these infinite loops. Okay. And if you receive an error, don't be afraid of errors. It's fine to get execution errors. Just try to read through the code again and troubleshoot the error. That's an important part of learning in programming. Even expert programmers handle a lot of failures and execution errors. They're just good at troubleshooting. So that's another skill that you need to keep developing, along with learning the syntax and developing the logic, thinking about what should be the logical flow of the program, what is the best and shortest way in which I can get a functionality working. You should also spend time on whatever errors you get, read the error, understand the error, build your error vocabulary along with learning programming. Okay, that is the agenda that I had for today's class. Okay, these topics that I wanted to discuss. So you've understood all of these. I'm going to share the code on Google Classroom, and this recording will also be available to you. In the next class, we'll start with more collection data types. Okay, so far we've just learned basic data types and this collection data type string, which is a collection of characters. Now we'll move on to other collections, which are like, it could be, you could store a collection of strings, a collection of numbers, or collection of collections in Python, and then you could loop through those complex collections. Anyway, okay, don't get confused about collections so far. Just practice this part of the code. I'll give you a few assignment questions. Just complete those before next class.
Ma'am, I
Okay.
want to ask one thing.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Ma'am, is the list is a string or kind of string or another data type?
List is another data type. It could be, so string is just a collection of characters, right? List is a collection where you could store multiple strings within a list. You could store multiple numbers. You could store numbers and strings. So you can imagine list to be like, again, almirah with racks, but in this case each rack does not contain just a character. Each rack could contain a string in itself. It could have a number. It could have a list in one of the racks. It could have a boolean here. So it can be mix of things. If you just wanted to store a group of things together in one variable, you use a list. And there are a few other collection data types also. Okay, so we'll discuss lists in detail in the next class.
Okay, ma'am.
But that's a good.
And in the last code, if we code break in place of continue, then what will be the result?
So it just comes outside the loop. If the moment break is encountered, not only the next few lines of that iteration are skipped, but the further iterations are also skipped. When you're using continue, only the next few lines of the specific iteration are skipped. The execution moves on to the next iteration. But when you use break, you just come outside the loop. All the iterations are skipped after that.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Okay.
Thank
then
you, ma'am.
Okay, I'll see you next week then, and please do complete all the assignments.